believe. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to Careers in Technology, the Spring Series 2025. Tonight, we have a special guest, Eamon Wall, who is a patent attorney. He's going to take us through his personal background and career journey, professional development, projects and interests, insights about the technology field, and we would like ongoing engagement with the audience. So I'm going to take down the slides and introduce Eamon, and he'll tell us a bit about his background in engineering and his transition into patent law.
Is that my cue?
Yep, that sounds good.
All right. So how far back shall I go to start?
Well, actually, I'd really love it. Like, one of the things that's really cool about this conversation is we get to think about it in terms of like an oral history, but an informal oral history. So if you tell us,
Let's start at the beginning. So
yeah.
When a daddy and a mommy love each other very much. I'll go for a little bit.
Great. So I understand you grew up right here in New Jersey, right?
I was born in Boston, but I grew up in Homedale. So moved there in '68. Fun fact, we used to play as kids at the Bell Labs property, scooting in and out of their bomb shelters because you really can't lock those, bombs. And it was interesting. Some of the neighborhood guys worked at Tom Gibson was one of the guys. I think he worked on the C programming thing. With there was a lot of technology folks around, and it was interesting. Most of the people in town were, business types. My dad was marketing type.
What did your dad do? What was his career?
Pharmaceutical marketing primarily. Chase Chemical, different encapsulation companies, Baxter Travel Labs prior to that. And then ultimately get sucked into real estate like everybody else seems to do.
And what about your mom? What about your mom? Can you tell us a little bit about her?
Oh, she worked, well, she came off the boat from Maryland, and she came over and started working for CBS when she got here. She went to, I think, Longford Technical University studying accounting, I believe. And I only just found this out a few weeks ago talking to her. And dated Charles Perrault for a while, but ended up dating my father, marrying him, and all that. And they,
You dated who? You have to repeat that so I can hear.
Charles Perrault, the CBS guy. They went out for a little bit.
Very cool.
Yeah, and so the whole suburban thing, Long Island, or Long Island, as my cousins all say, and moved down.
And you had sisters and brothers. You had sisters and brothers growing up.
Yeah, a sister and 3 brothers. Yep.
Big family.
Yeah, well, by our standards, it's about medium size, midland. My current law partner, Tom, I think he's got 10. He was one of 10.
Wow.
But yeah, I mean, it was for those contemporaries, 50s, 60s, whatever. We all grew up in a different kind of time than exists now, and there was a lot of technology.
Did you go to Catholic school or did you go to the local public school?
St. Leo's in Lincroft, 1st to 5th grade, then 6th, 7th, and 8th in Homedale, and then CBA, Eastern Brothers Academy in Lincroft for high school. Mm-hmm. And my kids went there also. It's been cool. And a lot of, honestly, the main thing you learn, I remember just vividly just being hammered on the notion of critical thinking. It wasn't dogmatic at all. I think it's gotten a little more so, but it wasn't. And that kind of approach serves you well. And one of the things I've always told my kids was to always question authority, But if you get a good answer, go with it.
Right.
Don't be a putt. Do what you're supposed to do. And so, yeah, so CBA and undergrad, I went to Monmouth College at the time, EE. I was working. I went at night, so I was working as in an engineering department of a firm, Electronic Measurements, over on Essex Road in Neptune, power conversion. So I did a lot of different things, power conversion and software, and it was different it was a different kind of engineering. It was less structure than I became used to later, dealing with all the people from clients like Lucent and, ATT, those kinds of companies. If we had a good idea, we pitched it to the marketing guys and said, yeah, do that. And the engineering manager said, yeah, go do that. And you did it. And as a technician, I designed products as a technician while I was going to school for engineering. And then I stayed there while I was going to school for law at night also at Rutgers. And my pitch to the CEO of the company was, because they did pay for half my engineering tuition. I said, well, hey, if you pay for half my law tuition, I promise to stay here for the 4 years it's going to take me to do it. And you'll have my great work that whole time. And his counteroffer was, well, how about you keep doing good work and maybe I don't fire you and no on the tuition. And so I said, yeah, sure, okay. And that's how it went. But
So he did not pay for the tuition, is what you're saying?
Not for law, no. And fair enough.
Right. Not many people will pay for the law school, right?
Well, there used to be programs at a lot of the big companies, RCA, ATT, all these companies, they had programs where they would put engineers through law school. Some of the people you knew from Bell, they went through that program. And it was a good program. It's like GE had a program for, I forget the term of it. It's like an accounting thing, but they would send as new people, just all over the world to fix whatever problems needed fixing in whatever facility. And the notion is you learn an awful lot if you're immersed in it totally, inescapably, totally immersed in a problem. You need to solve it to survive in that corporate culture. You figure it out. Auditing, the GE used to call it the audit program. And it was a way for new people that they thought were going to do well. It was a real track. And audit track led you to C-suite eventually. That was the hope. Or from there out into the companies, like into other similar type companies. So a lot of these companies had their technology tracks and their management tracks and, the whole MTS system. But on my side, I liked engineering a lot. I loved engineering. And I worked as an engineer for a while in school. But then I went into patent law. And I knew I didn't go to law school with some question as to what kind of law I'm going to practice. There was never any thought that, maybe I'll close real estate deals or, represent people in slip and fall cases. No, never did, never cared about anything. It was going to be patent law. The only question was, do you go to court? Do you not go to court? I did a little bit of going to court. Not a fan. Don't do that.
Do you have any like iconic patent attorneys or other attorneys who you've admired over the years that you?
Oh, yeah. One of the guys, one of my current partners, Peter Emanuel, was my first boss at GE RCA Licensing in 1995. So I worked there from February 95 to February 97. Corporate in the patent department. RCA Licensing was a massive, literally hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars a year in licensing revenues. It was based on the IBM model for patent licensing, and essentially grew out of a consent decree reached in the 50s. I think it was 52 between David Sarnoff Labs, and the U.S. government. Sarnoff had been supposedly really abusive in how the patents were used. And there's a story about a guy named Farnsworth from FM radio and so on. There's a lot of stories there. I think the book Defining Vision hit some of that. But the long and the short of it was that Sarnoff lost U.S. rights to this gigantic portfolio. And so they did what they were now incentivized to do, which was to use the foreign rights as patents. And they licensed all these companies to do consumer electronics. That was the birth of the consumer electronics industries in Korea and Japan and Europe. They licensed all of these U.S. patents from Sarnoff to, Samsung and Hitachi and Sony, of course. All these and there was ongoing research out of Zurich, out of Tokyo, out of Indianapolis to support the technology, to improve the technology, and that's just the way it went for many, many years. It's now owned by, those patents went to, that business was traded with Thomson the French company, essentially they traded. GE said, well, here, you take all of our gigantic portfolio, and in exchange, you give us your medical. We don't want consumer electronics. We want to be in medical. And so they did a trade. And GE essentially said, well, you're about $1 billion short, so we're just going to keep this little piece of it for a while. And they did. And they made hundreds of millions more for a while. And then that fully went over to Thomson. I think it then went to Technicolor and then to InterDigital, where they mostly are now. In fact, I saw a bunch of those guys at lunches over the last couple months. Some of the people that are my contemporaries at these operations. But that was the entirety of digital television. We did Grand Alliance stuff back in the day, early digital television, early MPEG stuff. The competing standard, if you can believe it, was an analog standard out of Japan that it was doomed to fail. But it was clever as hell. But the digital television standards that we have now, which are very collaborative. It's not like one company did everything. No, it was collaborative. And that's why we have what we have now, why we have constant wasting of our time and talent through these little screens that we all look at day in, day out. But I think I veered off course here. But that's how the early me went. It was on the RCA side, and then just private practice after that. The one thing I do like about patents, working in patents, is I get to see a lot of technologies, and inherently you're seeing the newest version of the technology. You're watching the inventors figure it out. In fact, a lot of times when I'm interviewing an inventor about they tell me the invention is this, A, B, C. My view is that the invention is whatever an allowed claim ends up being. The inventors don't even know the invention. They know embodiments of the invention, that's for sure. But the invention of the term is really the legal, what are the claims, the issued claims, granted claims. And you can ask inventors a lot of questions, and I just poke them in the belly and see what pops out of their brain and their mouth. And they can sort of invent more on the fly, provide it right then and there. And that's how you get a more robust patent application, something of commercial value. And I think everybody here is familiar with the basics of a patent. That's I won't belabor that point. Just defines the metes and bounds of your process, your apparatus, your composition of matter, chemical, drug, whatever. So you get to imagine that you're doing a little bit of engineering. You're not. You're a voyeur and a scrivener. No engineering change order. No worry about the Gantt chart and where the project is progressing. No, I just get to absorb the technology, write about the technology, and then move on to the next thing. And so there's a surface level thing we get to do. We go very deeply into a narrow thing, and then go to the next narrow thing. I don't have to make it work. I don't have to meet a budget other than for my professional services. I have to be, reasonable, of course, and competitive. But I don't have to do the things that engineers need to do and need to do well in this day and age, especially. So it's an ancillary function to the broader goal of advancing a technology to solve a market problem, whatever that problem is. And ultimately, when I'm talking with my clients about whatever they're doing, I point out, frankly, the obvious thing that it's the business plan that matters. It's what are you doing with this? What is the market? How are you addressing it? How are you meeting their needs? How are you better than your competitors? Which is where patents can kind of come in. They give you some exclusion in terms of some of your rights, and that's helpful to get a leg up on your competitors. But ultimately, you need to be better, smarter, faster, cheaper. You need to execute well. You need to communicate well. You need to get it done. Get it done. That's what needs to happen typically in any setting. And, so we try to help with that. And that's.
I apologize about that little break there. My computer crashed.
Oh, no worries. No worries.
I don't know what I missed, but I'm sure it was interesting, and I'll be able to
We
watch
talked about some old television stuff.
Which television?
I think some of the history of the digital TV. I think you had a bit of an agenda. I don't have it up on the screen now. If you wanted to go to particular things, I can talk about how patent attorneys work, what the education requirements are, what are you trying to achieve, etc.
Yeah, so I think we began by speaking about your background and your history and your personal story, and then we went into the preparation and how you worked while you were going to school, which gave
Don't
you a leg.
recommend that. I don't recommend that at all. No,
Okay.
no, I wouldn't let my kids work. I just would refuse. No, your job is to be a student. That's it. You student, keep studenting, and that was it.
That's wonderful. Very insightful. Then you spoke about your first job and then the patent attorney you admired.
Yeah,
And
Peter Manuel. Like I said, there's a number of patent attorneys that I admire. The first bunch of patent attorneys I knew, well, there's a couple. One of them who kind of, he says he didn't, was a patent attorney in Red Bank, Peter Michelson, that I knew from the YMCA. We just happened to go to the gym at the same sort of times in Red Bank. And he's a patent attorney. We were talking about that. I said, oh, it sounds interesting. And he was kind of influential on me in a sense. He didn't encourage me or discourage me. He just sort of told me about it. I thought, yeah, that's interesting. And I went for that. Years later, he says that he had no influence. I said, no, that's not true. You know, but the it's a decent gig. It's interesting. I find it interesting. It's focused. It's in the minutia. You need to get the details right. You need to get into the zone. I remember designing, whether it's software or hardware, or whatever. I remember as an engineer designing things where we were so loosey-goosey that I had to do all of the things. I would literally lay out a circuit board and write firmware and, choose a processor and all that kind of thing for the product, the digital controller for power systems, for example. And the flip side of that loosey-goosey approach is it's really resting on your shoulders. If you told the people that you can do it, you better do it. And
there's a process in patent law, right? There's a process. There are certain documents you prepare. There are certain parts of the documents that you prepare, and
yeah,
doing background action.
Ultimately, the whole point of the patent is to whatever's novel, not obvious. There's a claim. It's all about the claims. A method, steps 1 through 3, an apparatus having these parts configured to operate in a particular manner, whatever. And so we have the claims, and you have the drawings that support the claims, the specification that describes the drawings, some other parts that don't particularly matter, but you do, summary
But they have
aspects,
to be there,
etc.
right? They have to be there, like, yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
so part of the pro forma presentation of this information, you have to have them in there. And depending upon how much prior art exists, you might have more or less of a background because it's an advocacy thing. You are an attorney, you are advocating. I guess I should stop. You don't need to be an attorney to do this. There's 3 sorts of creatures that inhabit this pond: patent attorneys, patent agents, and technical advisors. And a patent attorney is just an attorney that also passed the patent bar. So I'm New Jersey and New York licensed as an attorney, and I also passed the patent bar. Patent agent is an engineer who, you have to be a degreed engineer. I'm double E. Patent agent is just an engineer who's not an attorney who passed the patent bar. And I'd say 80% of what I do, a patent agent can do also.
and then that bar, the agent can get all the materials online and study it and then sign up and take the bar, right?
Yeah. And you can also be a technical, I think it's called technical assistant TA or something. I forget the term. Often just a PhD without having the agent's exam, but with a really specific skill set of interest, who's typically a law firm. But it could be a patent department in a corporation.
Do you remember those specific, I think that the undergraduate has to be in a certain field, and then
so-called hard sciences, physics, electrical engineering, chemical engineering, chemistry, computer science, eventually. There's also some practicalities that, depending on the technology you're in, I guess we're mostly double E physics kinds of people here, except for some biomed type. But for double E type stuff, the bachelor's is fine. If you're doing a bio thing, if you hope to work, for example, in the pharmaceutical space, drafting patent applications as a patent attorney or patent agent, you probably have a PhD. You kind of need that. Now, as a practical matter, I've done a ton of work in AI and machine learning, and although I hate the term AI, but whatever. These kinds of spaces where it gets incredibly complicated, and I tend to get cases where there's a lot of math. I do okay at math, so if there's a real squirrely math thing, I might get that. Because I like to make sense out of it, and nothing brings me more joy than finding errors in an inventor's disclosure in a mathematical equation. But I'll never admit that in public or on recording.
Right, or getting ahead of the errors, right? So just getting ahead of it, yeah, because you want to add value to the inventor, you know.
Well, sometimes it's just curiosity. You just want to see, that's really, how does that work, or why is that so? And I was doing something in quantum entanglement. I thought, what do you mean you don't know how it works? It just works. That's not good enough. So you just get wrapped up in it, almost from like a Nova science perspective. It's just like, you're like, oh, that's cool. Let me dig into that. And it gets to be a rabbit hole. Then you say, no, stop it. You slap yourself and you start typing and doing the flow diagrams you need to do and so on, whatever you need to do to present the invention. Because you're on the clock.
And then you get an office action, right? Somebody will bring, and then you have to do background search too, right? You have to have, do you hire someone to do the background search to put the?
It depends. Clients who have a reasonable volume of, take what Lucent used to do, they would typically not do a detailed prior art search. I would always do a little bit of a search. I'd always look around just to make sure. Normally, I was fairly expert in the space, whatever it was. It's photonics or routing or network management for those, whatever it was. But I want to make sure that nothing's popped up since I last looked. And so I would do a little search. We didn't break it out as a separate billable item, but I wanted to know, and I wanted to make sure my vocabulary squared with what was presented by those skills in the art. Because sometimes in companies like the guys would have, or the people, I shouldn't say guys, the inventors would have their own way of describing things, and similar things going on, let's say in Lucent and maybe in Huawei or maybe in, I don't know, Qualcomm or something. They use slightly different language to mean the same thing. And so you want to make sure that you're looking at it all correctly. And yes, you do a bit of a prior art search because you want to make sure that your claims get as much scope as possible, but as correctly, possible. I don't want to have claims that are too broad. Even if I can advocate effectively and get broad claims past the examiner, I don't want to do that. I want to get claims of appropriate scope, because if I have to license or litigate or something, it's not one examiner I'm against. It's a team from some giant firm that they'll throw 10 people at it, and they will scour the earth to find prior art. So you might as well get it right now and avoid the cost of litigating past a ton of prior art. You'll end up in re-examination anyway later with your patent if you're asserting, and so on. So the point is, the job of the patent examiner, the patent office, is something of a Sherpa. They are there to help guide you to the top of the mountain, to get the claims that you should have, not necessarily the claims you want or think you should have. So it's a bit of a cooperative thing, except for some examiners who are just difficult. But
so we have some questions in the chat, and I just want to not ignore them. Is it all right if I read them, or do you want to read them?
Yeah.
Okay, let me read them. Some automotive companies will not pay for a law degree, but you can get one. Will not hire you or move to a law position, even patent, until you're out of company, established a few years and good. Then we'll have a contract to you, maybe hire you back at some point. Know a few engineers with law degrees. And then another question. A question may be the AI or quantum computer, and how does this work? And is the product or process patentable? Since AI is based on the inputs and training of a large language model, well, that's one type of AI. That's only, yeah. And is all
I guess I'll start. I see what is a claim? A claim is that which you own. It's a method comprising steps A, B, and C. And if somebody else if that's patentable and you have a patent grant and you have steps A, B, and C, if you find another company is doing that process with steps A, B, and C, they are infringing your patent. And a patent gives you a negative right. It's called a negative right. You have the right to stop somebody from making, using, or selling whatever the claimed invention is. In my example, a method of steps A, B, and C. It's the thing we fight for, and that it's all about the claim. Everything about patent law is about the claim. Anything that's not about the claims is about some way the claims are supported or not supported. Or there's this whole notion of fraud in the patent office, which isn't sort of fraud like, you might imagine like, a con man fraudster stuff, more along the lines of, hey, did you know of a piece of prior art and failed to cite it in contravention of your duty to cite all the prior art? You didn't mean to do it. It's considered fraud in the patent office, and the validity of the patent would then be in question. So patents are hacked in a lot of different ways.
Right. And so one of the things that's maybe not familiar to many people is that when you submit a patent as a patent attorney or even by yourself, submitting your own patent or as an agent, you don't get to select the classifications of the patent. The office assigns the classifications, correct?
Correct. Yeah. I'm sorry?
I don't know. I think someone's microphone. There may be someone who's in the background. I apologize.
Yeah. I mean, the different classifications, well, that system mostly arose to help in the patent searching. So there's no point in searching for a patent about AI in a shoe. The boxes were called shoes back in the day to fit A4 paper. You don't look in mechanical art area for computer type art, that kind of stuff. So classifications are helpful in that regard. The abstract also is to help in patent searching. As a practical matter, people search now. They Google it. They go to patents.google.com. They go to the U.S. Patent Office website, uspto.gov. You go to the Europeans have a eSpaceNet. There's a lot of places to do patent searching. There's commercial services like Derwent and so on.
And today is Tuesday, right? Today is Tuesday. Is today Tuesday? Remember, is today Tuesday?
Tuesday.
Today is the day when the Patent Office publishes all their new patents for the week, right?
That's right. Patents come out on Tuesdays.
Yep. So everyone can look through the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office and look through all the new patents and get an idea of how many are coming out in each category too. So
yeah. Well, a lot of times companies will be talking about them, but ultimately, you're trying to in different industries, you're applying your portfolio. You're building a portfolio of your patent applications. If you get back to basic principles, how do these come about? They come about by a company or there's a market that needs satisfying by some product or service. There's engineers and non-engineers working to provide those products, those services to the market that needs to be served. They innovate to improve upon the products and services. That innovation, by definition, is new. It's hopefully not obvious. Maybe it's in a patentable area. Not everything is patentable, even if it's new and unobvious. There's subject matter issues. But just for the sake of argument, just assume that it's new and unobvious. It's in a subject matter area that's appropriate. You can, out of this process of innovating to solve the markets and in the real business, where this is necessary, the patent servers don't. You can get patent applications, and that supports your position. And with the negative rights, you can exclude your competitors from making, using, or selling that thing, giving you some exclusivity. With respect to the AI, quantum computers, and so on, quantum computing is that's pretty straightforward, and I've done a bit of that stuff. So we don't have the software issues. We don't have the so-called 101 type issues, the patentable subject matter issues. They're not abstract.
Can you explain what a 101?
Well, yeah. So you're not allowed to. The basic notion of patents is anything new under the sun. You're not allowed to patent, for example, plain old mathematical algorithms or compounds found in nature. For example, if you have some new medication and it turns out I don't know, you rub the back of a toad in Brazil and you say, oh, this compound is great. We're going to use it to treat some disease. That's great, but the compound itself, you can't own. It exists. It's known. What you can own is perhaps the method by which you synthetically produce that compound. And different countries have different approaches to this. I have clients with patents in India, for example, and they're more interested in the processing versus the actual drug. So there's some things that go on there. It's actually a very interesting place for patent law. It's relatively inexpensive to process there, to do your patent work there. But there seems to be a little bit of there seems to be multiple patent offices there. It's not just like we have the U.S. patent office. They used to have a few patent offices. It kind of depends on what city the examiner's in. But that's just a quirk of that country. Again, make, use, sell. So if you have a product that is used in particular countries, great. Those might be the countries to approach from where you file patent applications, which are national in nature, national, like trademarks, like other intellectual property. So.
Right.
There are some countries where it's worth filing, and there's some countries, frankly, continents where it's not. This doesn't matter. And it just depends on where things are being made, used, or sold.
And then the other thing, of course, is that you might patent a design, which is a design patent, right?
Yeah, well, that's a bit different. That's about the ornamental aspect. What I've been going on about thus far has been utility patents, which are
Right.
about the function, what you have in the traditional patents. Design patents are very useful. There's only about 100 patent examiners that do design work in the USPTO, and they tend to be kind of in the artsy crowd. They're not really technical per se. And what you're trying to do is protect something that is a design choice, the ornamental aspect of something. And a great example of why that has value is a prior firm did a lot of work for a company called Applied Materials. You may have heard of them. They make semiconductor equipment. Really, really expensive semiconductor equipment. And they will patent, from a design patent, a component of this gigantic expensive machine, this component. And you think, why bother? It's a component in this giant machine that costs $1.5 billion. What does it matter? It matters because when that component breaks and the fab needs to replace that component, they want the same thing. They want the thing that looks like the thing that's broken. They don't want to have any doubt. And you can say as another company, oh, well, our thing works the same way as the original equipment thing. Yes, it looks a little different because we're not allowed to make it look the same because they have a design patent. And the fab owner will say correctly, no, thank you. I'll take the original one. I'm just far too committed. There's too much money on the line to mess around with that.
Kind of like the screws in the replacement hips and the pacemakers with the leads and all these other devices they sell, where the manufacturer will sell you $1,000 screw, but somebody will sell you a $50 screw on the black market, right?
I don't know. I'm not familiar with that particular.
It's a problem. It's a thing. But we have a question from the
Can't just go to
audience.
Home Depot? No.
They do, actually. That's what they do. They go to, sheet metal company and get screws. Yeah. So
I see the questions. Let me just, the one that's kind of important and relevant today is on the AI side, especially. There's a lot of software type stuff. And things that you can patent within the AI space has to do with how you train your models, how you construct your models, these kinds of things. The output, not necessarily so. And I think there was a copyright document just released, I think today or yesterday, talking about what, from a copyright perspective, not a patent perspective, because patent is all about the claims, this and that. Copyright, another form of intellectual property, is technically the expression of an author affixed in a tangible medium. A poem, a song, a presentation, but also arguably the output of a generative AI type thing to draw a picture of whatever. In the UK, they've had holdings where they say, no, you're not an author if you messed around with ChatGPT and have it spit out a drawing. We don't care. It's not a copyrightable thing. I don't know where the line should be drawn there, and honestly, I don't really care. It's
In the
irrelevant.
US, they used to hold that position too, that a machine can't
Still
be
do.
an inventor, right? And a machine.
No, they can't be an inventor. That's correct. That is correct. And which gets into some really odd areas of law about who's liable for what. And ultimately, there's going to be strict liability. And if a self-driving car decides to run a bunch of people over because it, I don't know, acquires sentience and it just happens to be malevolent and for kicks it runs a bunch of people over, who's going to be at fault? I'm going to go with the company that made the car, but there's some other issues involved there too. But we're dealing with a lot of technologies which, in the popular mind, sound really, Star Wars futuristic thing, and they're really not. It's just software. It's just software.
Right.
It's
I mean,
unfathomably complicated, but still
yeah,
ultimately deterministic. It's just software.
exactly.
You know,
And also, if people fail to use good judgment when they design or build these things, and it's easy to
yeah,
tell. It's easy to tell if they designed it and created and fabricated and let things loose that have problems,
right. So I have applications pending now for the patent office where there are they have models built, trained in a particular way, but then you might have multiple models to establish boundary conditions for the parameters by which they operate. There's a lot of ways to, you can always have a recursion of models controlling models, and so on. And funny enough, ultimately, if you look at it, it starts to look like, that model controlling what this model does is somewhat akin to the temporal lobe controlling our impulse to, poke somebody in the eyes that we don't like or something. There's
and yet it's
behavior.
not the temporal lobe. We must always remember it's not the temporal lobe, right? We must always remember, even if we're trying to imitate human decision making and using some portion of that to describe our problem set and our solution, it truly is not, because there are other things you have that haven't been accounted for in your temporal lobe.
I didn't find any of that in my prior art search, so it doesn't matter.
I mean, and just like kind of moving in the direction of, they have this Turing test, right? But they also have the ADA test, right? And a lot of people maybe can't tell if this thing is smart or not, but I can tell you when I run into really bad software and I don't want to meet the person who designed and wrote that code. I think many of us can attest to that. So if there's an artificial intelligence around that's designed or written by some of these people, you can be sure some of it behaves in a way we are not happy about, and that people who solve the problem and, people who know how to solve the problem wouldn't solve it that way, right?
Yeah, look, there's poorly behaved code, there's poorly behaved ignorant people. I mean, it is on the AI side. So just let me wrap that up.
Yeah.
That's somewhat in flux, but they're working through it. The Europeans are ahead of us in terms of how to think about these things, in terms of software and so on. But we'll get there. One day, a light will shine upon the capital of this country, and they'll actually do something and maybe pass a law to fix some of the problems that have been visibly, annoyingly existing in the patent business for years now, years and years and years. And software and so on is part of that.
And whose benefit would it be? Can we like advocate?
Yes, we can. It's our benefit. Whatever helps us become more competitive, our companies, our people, our country as a whole, it benefits us. This is enshrined in Article 8 of the Constitution to promote the useful art, Article 1, Section 1, Article 8, I guess. It's beneficial to us. We will get to where we need to go eventually. It takes a while. There's a question about bidirectionality of patents on the international stage. The answer to that, honestly, is no. Patents are national in nature. It's a national right. Typically, if I have something take pharmaceuticals, they tend to have the patent attorneys who deal with that, the firms that deal with that, beyond just being a bunch of PhDs doing that particular compound and so on, there's a market for these drugs, and usually the market is everywhere. So you tend to file everywhere. And maybe a little bit of less filing for, say, medical devices, because even though everywhere can benefit from them, not everywhere uses them, and so on. So you file in the countries. There are mechanisms to more quickly, efficiently file in multiple countries. There's a thing called the Patent Cooperation Treaty, PCT, whereby it's an administrative layer by which you can file a patent application in accordance with the PCT requirements. And then you have an international process that does a search and a bit of an examination to give you a chance to decide then, oh, okay, it is not patentable. I'm going to stop spending money on it, or it seems to be a good idea still. I will now nationalize it directly into various countries. And in fact, even some countries and regions like the Europeans, you have the EPO, the European Patent Office, for the entire EP, which from a patent perspective, by the way, Britain is still a piece of. So the UK is still part of the EP patent apparatus. They haven't done that.
Just for a moment, I mean, you're familiar with this, but maybe our audience isn't. The distinctive difference between patenting in the in the UK at the time when the country was founded, and at the time when Stevens from Stevens Institute of Technologies graduated from King's University and decided to write the new patent law in the United States of America. The distinction between the patenting in the UK, in Britain
I was a
versus
bit young at the time.
yeah, but you know the
details
difference. You know the difference, right? Which is anyone can patent here, correct? And we don't have to ask the royal people for permission.
Yeah, I see where you're going with that. Yeah, because the patent had a broader meaning in merry old England. It was a right granted from the crown or from the king to you for something. And it may have been a patent right. It may have been the right to make chocolates for the queen. It may have been whatever. Yeah, it's not a thing owned by the crown and outsourced to you anymore. It's now in our system, based on our constitution, it's the thing that exists by virtue of you conjuring it up. I have found this thing, I've discovered this thing, and I am going to present it there, and therefore I'm going to own this. And the point, from a policy perspective, the point of patents is to encourage inventors to say to the world, this is what I did. Check it out. It's great. This is what I did, and it's mine for a period of time, and you can do something on top of this. The idea of standing on the shoulders of giants. And that is how it works, and it works very well.
This is why I'm so pleased to know you, Eamon, and to thank you for the patents you worked on for me and others, because not many people advocate for the voice of the person, just the person here, to elevate that, to document it, to enshrine it, and to recognize it as a unique contribution. And I thank you for that. I'd also like to ask you, maybe you can tell us how many patents you've done over the years and some of the top patents, or how many, if you have some idea, if you can help us to understand what your impact is as a patent attorney.
My impact, I'm a voyeur and a scrivener is kind of how I do this. And I don't know, 1,000 plus patent applications, I don't even know. Some years 30, 40, some years 100 plus. It depends. It just depends on what's going on, how quick things need to happen. There are years that are busier than others. There are 1998 through 2000 was insane. 2006, 7, 8, crazy also. So yeah, you just crank out. Literally crank out.
And do you have any notable, do you have any things that come to mind that you worked on that are now well known, or that you are grateful that you got a chance to be involved because they were super things that you liked? And
I mean, I've had patents that have been involved in litigations and licensing. And I mean, ultimately, for a patent attorney, if I've done my job well, I've properly captured the invention, I've properly claimed the invention. Hopefully the goal is that it provides some competitive advantage to the client. The most obvious case of that happening would be getting paid. I'm trying to think of something offhand. I don't like clip I don't like scour the patent databases for when mine issued. I just know they issued, and they're docketed, and I just move on. My part of the process is that initial part. I go back, I do opinion work. Obviously, I do litigation support work. I don't do litigation. If there's some weird, if you're trying to find infringement, you need to properly understand the elements of the claim and how they read upon what you're trying to find to be infringing of your claim.
So when
And
I was still at Bell Labs many years ago, I worked in the intellectual properties and licensing, the intellectual properties and licensing group for a while. And one of the things we would do is to look at the patents that they held and see which ones were where there were standards that were in the claims, right? So if you have a standard that's in
absolutely,
the claim, and then,
standard,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. If you can get so-called standard necessary type patents, where so Bell Lab Lucent was not part of, for example, some of the MPEG pools, the MPEG LA and so on, and yeah, when Alcatel bought them, Alcatel was, and so they created this other entity called Lucent Intellectual Holdings or something. And the point of that was to hold a patent somehow out in the ether. And I think a judge eventually said, look, you, Alcatel, bought you, Lucent. You, Lucent, had patents. You, Alcatel, bought those patents. You, Alcatel, are part of this pool. Put them in the pool. And that was the result of, there was a bunch of litigation about that. But you do get a fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory friend, as they say, licensing fee, hopefully from the patent pool. You put your IP in, you build the whole ability of that ecosystem, the ever-changing ecosystem. I know you've done a lot of work in the Bluetooth and other areas.
yeah,
These pools enable a lot of products. From the stuff from Marseille back I mentioned earlier regarding television, there's a lot of patents that went into that. When they were simple devices, when we were talking about tubes and guiding a beam and so on, it was different. When we got to where it's pretty much all digital, then you started to get to where you couldn't build a TV without infringing patents from dozens of companies. And so you're either going to have a patent pool and work together and play somewhat nicely, or you're going to have eternal litigation. And so wisely, the former was selected as a path. And a lot of patent attorneys were involved in that. A lot of engineers were involved in that. The whole point is to get to a solution. Whatever the problem is, solve it. We're all engineers at heart. So you want to solve it. And attorneys are like that too. Not just patent attorneys, but attorneys in general. The notion is their job is to advocate on behalf of their clients and to get the best result that their client can get. Now, that may be you don't get put on death row. That could be the best result. Or like from the movie Heavy Metal, they'll bury you in an unmarked grave so nobody can desecrate it. That was the plea bargain from that movie, if you remember. Ultimately, you're trying to get the best result. Sometimes the best result is you don't win what you wanted to win, or you lose, or, it depends. It depends.
so
There's so
the
many
best,
factors.
right, so the best idea for a person who has an idea is to immediately speak to an attorney or a patent agent or somebody who can advise
The
them
best
about.
idea for a person who has an idea for something is to immediately speak to nobody and think hard, long and hard, to whether there's a business there for that idea. When I see, especially independent inventors come into the office and they have, the ideas, and they tend to be, mechanical in nature or these kinds of things. And I'm thinking, yeah, I could probably get you a patent. However, what are you going to do with it? What's your business model? What's your business plan? How are you going to champion this? I want them to answer these questions. I'm not trying to be prissy about it. I'll write the application. If they say, here's money, write the application. Yes, I will. But like, please, don't just throw your money away. If it's something, there's all these patent invention brokers and all these other people who
Yeah, don't
will
pay attention to those people.
they'll tell you that it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. You're going to make a fortune, and they'll say, well, you can pay us either, I don't know, $15,000 for this, or you can pay us $20,000 and we won't take any cut. 15,000, we will take a cut, and they convince you that it's so valuable and it's worth paying that extra money. It's awful. It's just that whole business is awful.
So there's
if
a
they're
question in the window here, and it says, "Do you know Nathan Mervold, Intellectual Ventures
know of him, yeah,
and
yeah.
an opinion? An opinion? Is that
Been very successful. I think I have one of his books on cooking with cryogenics, I believe it was. I bought this for the hell of it. Yeah, there's some controversy in terms of patent assertion entities or non-practicing entities or patent trolls, depending on your point of view.
yeah?
They have a bunch of patents. They enforce their patents. Um, there's a lot of companies that do this. Um, it's a business. This is a right that exists. It's a business. One of the things that Intellectual Ventures does, as does other, like Into Digital, for example, they don't just have patents and they go out blindly asserting them. They build portfolios and they build upon them. They have expertise. They do things in-house. Yeah, they probably bought patents from somebody else, and some of these giant portfolios. I think what was it? One of the Canadian companies, they were just billions and billions of dollars for this portfolio. Nortel, the Nortel portfolio, huge when that was sold. I think Google offered 3.14159 billion for it. I'm sorry, my machine just went off there. My smart speaker.
You're talking to Google, yes.
Yeah, I got an Alexa over here.
Oh,
Um,
Alexa doesn't like it when you're cheating on her.
yeah, probably not. But with respect to electric fence, I don't have any negative or positive or any, to me, it's just business. It's just business. If you have a valid enforceable patent and you wish to enforce your valid enforceable patent, that is your choice. If somebody chooses to fight with you or not pay you, that's fine. There's rules for the game. There's rules in how you do this. You can be incredibly oppressive, and there are some patent assertion entities that are. They're ridiculous, and they should be sanctioned, and some of them are. But I don't. I mean, I represent people on the so-called creation side, less so on the assertion side. On the creation side, my job is to help get the patent,
Right.
and what's done with them by the
If
companies, that's a different story.
companies went out of business, right? So there's there's a question here about dead companies, zombie patents, and I'm guessing if they went out of business, they're not paying the maintenance fees, and so the patents
Right.
are not a patent anymore, right?
True, but when they went out of business, they had a bankruptcy proceeding and they had assets, and the assets were sold to pay for whatever remaining debts, and probably the assets include the intellectual property, and they were bought. So those maintenance fees probably were paid. In fact, I would venture to say that the trustee during the bankruptcy proceeding, let's say they're doing a reorganization of, I think it's under Section 11 or liquidation under 7, I guess it would be. Their job is to preserve the asset value, the estate, and part of that preservation requirement is pay the maintenance fees. You have to have something to argue. Even when I deal, and it happens frequently, funny enough, when you're dealing with people where they're especially if two companies working together, like who invented what, or is this a joint thing? I said, look, the inventorship has to be correct. By definition, an inventor is one who has contributed to a claim. If
Right.
claim 23 is that guy, we can carve that claim out, and therefore he hasn't contributed to a claim and he's not an inventor. I don't recommend that, though. I think whoever's just part of the gang, and not just everybody in the meeting room. When I see a disclosure with 8, names on it, I start to say, oh, come on, who really did something here? But for me, the goal is, let's at least preserve something to argue about. Let's get a patent. Whatever it is, let's get the inventorship right. Let's get the invention properly defined. Let's draft an application. Let's have the claim properly within the prior art. Let's do all that stuff that needs to be done properly to create something of value. And then we can all argue about it. Then we can fight about it. Let's have something to fight about, or else, what's the point?
Thank you so much. So I think the bottom line lesson here, I'm going to fix my fuzzy face.
Nortel chip maker.
Somebody wrote the code there. We don't like the way they wrote the code, but there we go. And there are so many questions that we all have, but I have a feeling that some of them depend. Like if you think about whether or not you can make money in 10 years, that depends. If you were betting on not having a pandemic and you didn't know that vaccine technology was going to be needed, you would have been like almost everybody on the planet not investing in that technology, except for a very few people who were able to pivot and come up with that vaccine, right?
But the mRNA technology, they've been working on for like 20 years. They've been working on that.
That's right.
And
That's
yeah, they did
right.
pivot and they did warp speed. I think the main thing warp speed was, well, here, everybody gets money. Money for you, money for you, money for you. Do what you can. Oh, that failed, but that worked, and that failed, and that worked. And so it was good. That worked out.
Yeah, but that doesn't always happen. You have like Moore's law where people sort of plan in a kind of almost collusion, but not collusion, that they're going to work with this one and they're going to work with that one and they're going to work and they're going to do it at this kind of a pace. They're going to make this change and they're going to make that change. But then with the AI, you have someone who came up with, instead of a multi-billion-dollar infrastructure to make the AI, they came up with a different infrastructure, an orthogonal solution that wipes everyone else out of the water because they chose a different architecture and a different approach. It works and it's, satisfying and worthwhile.
the deep seek.
Yeah,
Yeah, I want to see more about that. I'm
right. I know.
unconvinced.
I know,
I'm
but
very unconvinced.
all of this stuff, every bit of it is
Yeah.
marketing, right? Every bit of it is, how do you talk about it? Like you said, what words do you use to describe it?
To me, the main export of China is BS, honestly. I want to see more. I want to see more. They've
Yeah,
brilliant engineers and technologists, but
yeah.
when I
So
start seeing this kind
speaking
of
of
stuff,
that, what about paper mills? So do people care about this? Like if you're using this AI and to generate papers that look like they're real papers and then have like
well, that's a whole
people,
different story.
you know,
Yeah.
right. But I mean, it's intellectual, it's a thing. It's becoming a problem now.
Yeah, no,
Um,
I mean, you go on Amazon right now, you can find all kinds of books written by AI about whatever topic, for $2 or $3 on your Kindle, and maybe it's fine, or the AI art. I'm not saying it's good or bad or indifferent. It's just, you know, I think the visual arts for AI, just my own personal preference, this is, my opinion, like everybody else's. I'm not really a fan. It's kind of weird looking, but whatever weird looking it is, whatever it is that jars in my mind, whatever it is about it, likely you throw another model there to smooth that,
right.
it'll
So
they'll make
like
it fit my brain.
in neuroscience, right?
Mhm.
Years ago, I did a lot of research with fMRI imaging of the brain, right? And so some of the things that we looked at are people looking at virtual reality, where you have an animated thing that does the sign language, American Sign Language, right? And you could see that the person's brain, certain networks are engaged. And when you see, what they call linear motion versus biological motion, there's this one network engaged for linear motion, like a car driving down the street, versus other very distinctive motion, like a ball falling from the air. Someone's hit the ball with a baseball bat and the ball comes with an arc. Your vision system isn't fast enough to process that by vision alone. It's using these like networks in our brain that are designed to recognize this kind of a function of things falling at our gravitational experience, right? So our brain has that underlying ability. The same thing is going on when you talk about the imaging that you're talking about that's been generated. At some point in our brain, there is a network that recognizes biological stuff that's real from stuff that's not real. And it's just a matter of at what point you're aware of that. And humans can learn
Yeah,
stuff. We can learn not to step in front of the car, right? We can learn that. But deer don't have an experience with learning about the car. And they get hit by the car because they don't know about linear motion. It's not a thing that their brain can process.
yeah, I
You
can
know.
attest to this. Yeah, look, I don't think it's a question of deciding what's real and not real. It's a question of what's important and not important. Even in the MPEG type stuff, you had, truncating the high frequency coefficients, the DCT coefficients, because it didn't matter. You didn't process it. Or in the telecom systems, frequencies over a certain amount, I think 4, 8 kilohertz, whatever it was. Who cares? You
Right.
still can get a conversation through.
Yes.
And with respect to what your eye sees of the baseball, it's all that really matters is the baseball. So the background is irrelevant, and your brain will
It's
say,
not
"Ah,
about
I don't
that.
care."
It's about whether or not you can catch it. So if you're
Yeah,
yeah. So if you can catch it because you can predict where it's going to be, that's because the part of your brain that recognizes gravity and this trajectory is working.
and so all of these things. The reason I'm going a little further than that is that conceptually, you've got prior art there from a patent perspective. If one of the advantages, so the dichotomy is technical problem, technical solution for a typical patent type thing. You have to have a technical problem and you have a technical solution.
Right.
And one of the technical solutions that exists is reduction of problem space. Reduction of problem space. So instead of solving for some big area, you solve for something. Actually, the very first Lucent patent application I did, I forget the guy's name, but it was reduction of problem space to calculate number of hops for a line if you're going to nail up a line somewhere within a network. And it did that with different geometric shapes. You would exclude certain areas. Like if I'm going to go from New York to Boston, I don't really need to verify that it's not cheaper to go to Tokyo. So it may be. You limit things. As probably, for example, maybe California to New York, and there's different ways that you can limit things. So reduction of problem space, improvement of, let's say, how a computer operates. For example, not just having an algorithm that runs on a computer, but if it improves the operation of a computer, that gets you sometimes in some of the 101 abstract areas over the hurdle patent-wise. I'm kind of on the career path, on the career notion of patent attorneys. I want to hit whatever it is I'm supposed to hit. So
Yeah, so I'm just suggesting that at this point, there's more stuff to learn and to understand conceptually to reduce these problems to really back into the domain that's patent law, as opposed to being amazed by somebody telling you this is one way cool AI thing.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, one of the things that I've asked inventors is, hopefully you have an inventor notebook of some sort. It doesn't have to be paper, it could be an old-timey paper. But when somebody says, oh, wow, that's cool. Hey, check this out. Whenever that happens in a lab, somebody would be writing something down, you know?
Yes.
Unless they're watching sports. Then
yeah, so these things happen all the time. And some people say, oh, I would have just solved that problem anyway. But you may not be aware how unique it is. You may not be aware of how to, yeah.
That was the problem with Bell Labs, where you're dealing with some people who were maybe the preeminent specialists in that field. And they have a problem and they solve the problem in the way that they always solve the problem, or they say, oh yeah, we'll just do this. Yeah, what they just did was patentable. It didn't feel like a big, moment to them, but it was patentable. Not everything is a dramatic moment. Most technical things are not. But for people
not every moment is a COVID vaccine solution, right?
No, it's not, and thank God. But I'll bet you even along the path for the COVID vaccines, and there's a lot of patents involved. All these companies have patents that they're all kind of asserting against each other. So pretty clearly, there's a competitive, cooperative kind of thing going on. They're sharing papers every time there's a seminar or a meeting of some sort. Immediately from a patent perspective, immediately before a meeting, in the telecom space, it was always like the Madrid thing. I think it was that in May. I think there's always
there's one coming up in June.
Yeah.
So
all hell breaks loose, and a bunch of disclosures have to be written or provisionally filed or whatever, and quick. And then you try to talk to the people who are going to be speaking and say, what are you going to say? Are you going to say only what's in this presentation, or are you going to stray outside that? If you're going to color outside the line, that which is outside the line may not be protected. So make sure you're not talking about things that are really valuable. Inevitably, and every company does this, the guys in the other company are going to ask really pointed questions to push somebody outside the line. They're going to do it. I've literally seen it happen in real time, where I've been at the back of the room going, no.
throwing popcorn. Hey, let's have some popcorn.
Yeah.
We're tired of listening to this.
Yeah. So you need to keep your mouth shut. And there was questions about what to do when somebody has an idea, and you start with not talking about it. If it's oftentimes, you might have a couple of people, just friends, a couple of friends working together, like, hey, let's do this. I always suggest, put in place a mutual non-disclosure agreement. Bind yourselves to each other as if you're not allowed to talk about this stuff. Show evidence of protecting the secret nature of it. Because for that moment, it's a trade secret of indeterminate value, whatever, it's a trade secret. It might become a patent, it might become nothing, who knows? Some of the best advice I've given to inventors is forget about it, go play golf. This is not worth your time. It might be patentable, but it's not worth your time. But the point is, from a day-to-day, what most patent attorneys do, we tend to work for fewer clients. I do, some defense stuff, some Princeton stuff, some other stuff. And we see some of the same people day to day, and we get pretty good at, we start to think we're pretty good at what we're doing in terms of the technology. We're not. We're lying to ourselves. It's the event, the 5 PhDs who are inventing that thing, they know what they're doing. We at best can sort of say, oh, I see you've written that in English. I do know English, and you can go that far.
Yeah.
But you get to play along. You get to tag along, and it's fun. It's fun to delve into the technology from a curiosity perspective. It's fun to learn the new things. I like it. A lot of patent attorneys like me, we also do trademark. I do a little bit of copyright. I copyright, books for people, whatever, bands. But on the trademark side, it's all about branding. So it's it's the such and such brand of whatever product. And that gets to be interesting. And one of the interesting things between patents and trademark inventors versus trademark owners, inventors are more business oriented, that, oh, okay, this is patentable or not patentable. Okay, I can't get a patent. Oh, well, that stinks, but whatever, let's stop. The name of the game in the patent business, like anything else, is if you're going to fail, fail as quickly and cheaply as possible. Fail now. Don't fail 2 years down the road. Fail now. Know that you should be failing. Don't just throw it away, but fail now. Trademark owner, when you find that that mark is maybe not going to pass muster with the trademark office for one reason or another, or that somebody's already using something similar, it's like you've insulted the looks of their child. They get really upset, and but it's always been that way. I don't know why. It's less businessy and more
Emotional.
Yeah,
Emotional.
yeah, and so if we're talking about career type stuff, patent people have an opportunity to trademark typically, and maybe copyright. My suggestion is to do less copyright, let copyright people do that. It's not complicated until you get into litigation, and then you're out of your skis really quickly if you don't litigate day to day. If you're litigating, you should be on a Monday morning thinking about going to court. I don't do that, nor do I wish to, and most patent attorneys don't. Most attorneys don't. So you want to find things that you like.
Next time we have an episode like this, I know you have to run, but I know the next time we get together, it would be really great to talk about what happens when people want to take their brain with them to their next job.
Well, you're allowed to do that. I can firmly say you're allowed to do that. There's non-compete agreements. There's other things that can be considered restraint of trade. Things have to be reasonable in scope, in duration. And different states have different laws. That's a state law thing about what kind of non-compete is appropriate. And for some reason, there's a lot of litigation in that area, that very particular area, with respect to dentists. I don't know why, but there is. Attorneys can't sell their practice. I can't sell my practice to somebody, but medical people can. They do it all the time, and they can also own ancillary businesses. Like you can be an orthopedic guy and you can own a piece of an MRI, place. I cannot. They will sanction me or do some other bad thing. I'm not sure what they do, but I'm probably bad.
You don't want to know.
I don't want to know. I don't care to know. But it's a very different thing, and it's
So if you're an inventor and you worked at a big major company and then you decided to go somewhere else or start your own company, and then took your brain with you and probably reconstructed stuff because you know about the stuff, and then you built the stuff, and then you now have to face your old employer and stuff. That's sort of the thing I was also thinking about,
Yeah. You have to be willing at times to say to somebody, sue me, I dare you. Go for it. Go ahead. Take your facts to court. I'll see you there. I mean, I get threatening calls on behalf of my clients all the time, and I don't even care. It's like, until you file a complaint against me, I don't even notice you. I don't care. To me, you're just somebody screaming into the void, and I'm happy to represent the void in that instance. There's a comment here that's, I think, kind of important about projects done and wrap up. These processes by which innovations occur, they tend to be somewhat continuous. They're happening all the time, but executive attention is focused on projects in a discrete manner. So there are different points within a project where you kind of sum it up and you take, where are we? What can we protect? What should we do? And we used to call it a patent scrub. Given a product, like for Lucent, for example, you have a new switch that comes out. Prior to it going out, prior to it being shown to the world, in other words, disclosed, you want to look at it from every which way. What did we do? What was new? What was different? What problems did we solve? Is there something about this that we did that we haven't teased out of it in terms of a protectable thing, a patentable thing? And some of the switch, I think there was a switch with Lucent, I think some of the switch fabric was built by Hewlett Packard. It was fast as hell. It was brilliant. And I remember being part of that patent scrub in Mountain View, just going through things with the project engineer. So yeah, and we went through all that, and they had other questions about. They asked for the audience, the project managers and people there, what can they do different? And my suggestion was, make some things that are a little less awesome. I mean, they make really expensive, awesome stuff. Make something kind of crappy. You don't need 99.99% uptime in some markets. 82% might be fine, depending where you are. So
my house, it's like 20% uptime.
right. But the point is like scaling an effort, scaling a product, scaling a quality level to what the market will bear. There's markets that won't bear the kind of expensive things. I mean, take the car market. It's hard to buy a really crappy car now, but for the longest time, that was no problem. You could easily do that. And you had to pay a lot of money to get something that was good and pretty easy to get something bad. Now it all seems to be pretty good. In this country, in other countries, yeah, go get a Trabant or a Lada, to bring it back home, it's all about marketing. It's all about what is the product or service that you're selling to? What do you need to have from a business plan perspective? Absent the business plan, you shouldn't even be worried about anything. Once you have your plan, what is it that supports the plan, patent-wise, if that's the thing? But there's more to it than that. How are your finances? You can't be spending all your money on patents. You've also got to, pay people to do things. You've got to get product. You got to develop services, whatever it is. There are costs. You have to balance all this stuff. And so you have to be kind of focused. What is it that will give you the most bang for the buck from a patent perspective? What are some tricks you can do to maybe have applications that have way more in them than you need to have it, but you can let them sit there for a little while and get back to them in a couple of years. There's that kind of thing. Not the submarine patent, but more of a holding vessel, a container, a vessel within which you put your intellectual property and store it for a year in a provisional application, pull it out in a non-provisional. You got another 2-3 years before much happens. 4 years down the road, maybe you're at your passive seed round into a first round of financing, and you can then.
And it's not that much money anyway to file. I mean, if you're a micro entity, it's like $400 or something like this, right?
But a micro entity, I mean, first of all, there's a $50,000 limit. There's only 5 applications you can file, and then doesn't matter what you are. Then the 6th one, I think, you become small entity. But I actually have a client who's a micro entity. And then I came to these ideas, and I was like, I don't know if I get a patent, but I would keep getting a patent, and they would keep coming back. I'd say, look, Jesus, do something with it. Don't just, come back to me with these ideas. I want you to do something with it,
Right. And so to that end, the Department of Commerce has been doing a lot to help inventors become good at doing a lot with their patents.
It's a business. Yeah. You have to treat it as a business. If you're not treating it as a business, then you're in the wrong business.
Everyone here can subscribe to the Department of Commerce. They have newsletters, they have webinars. They have a whole series on how to become an inventor. They invite people to come to this. How many different offices in the United States? Is it regions? Is it 6 regions or 5 regions? I can't remember this. The Northeast, right? Then there's the Southeast, there's the Midwest. The patent offices have different regions,
Oh,
right?
oh, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't
And then
know. I mean,
yeah, they invite
there's my
people.
region and there's everything else. I don't really know.
Right, right. Yeah. So, certain patents pop up by topic depending on the region because the industry is in certain regions. And
Yeah, that is true.
yeah,
That is true. Um,
yeah, but nevertheless, anybody here on this call or anyone who's listening to us on the recording can go onto the US Patent and Trademark Office website or the Department of Commerce website and subscribe to the newsletter and find out about these seminars that they have. They have webinars online. They're free. People can learn all kinds of things about patenting or about,
yeah, if they're
promoting your
still
patent.
up,
Right. Yeah, I
unless they've
didn't
been
want to make a
purged.
statement about that. Yeah. And then the offices are open to the public and they have a library there and you can go in and do your own research if you want to. If you don't know how to do it online, you can go in. There are people who will help you do your
Mhm.
research if they're open. I don't know if they're open right now, but in normal conditions, you can do that. Now that this pandemic is over and the offices are open, it's really probably a great idea to just go in and look in the library, right?
Yeah, a lot of the examiners are remote still, and you know, they do their job fine. Whether I'm talking to somebody who's sitting at a desk in Alexandria or somebody who's on a beach somewhere, as long as we're doing what we need to do, it works. Um, so I know much of that is changing. I prefer being in an office. I have actually probably better set up here at home than I do in my office, but I like to go to the office and be with people.
Yes.
And that's another thing about patent attorney job, career-wise. It's I like to be with people, and so as it happens, law firms have other people in them, as do companies. So I don't. We hired a new associate, started.
But then you have to leave the cats at home alone.
I do. That's why I have two kittens. They can murder each other each
Kitchen,
day.
right.
But if you're starting out in your career, I think you need, for people who are starting out, whatever the career, you need to be there. You need to show up. You need to rub elbows with people and learn, I don't know, corporate culture and stuff. Things I tell my son about, when he's an engineer with a company in New York, electrical engineer.
So
You got,
I'm shifting a little focus, and that is to this humanitarian stuff you've been doing with us and the tutoring, the leaders, like, the lunch with leaders and luminaries and helping us with young people to encourage them and speaking with them. Is this a satisfying opportunity for you? Do you find that, sharing to helping people find their vision, is that something that
yeah,
you
I do. Now that I'm officially old, yeah, it seems to be okay. This is sort of what's next. Um, you know, it's not just telling old stories, which I kind of don't really like to tell old stories. I like to point people in the direction of, if there's some interesting stuff there, check it out.
And that's what you did for your son also, but also now you're doing
Yeah,
it for our community. Now you come to our meetings and speak to
well,
the
you got
young.
to tell people need to know things. I mean, simple things, just how to behave, how to relate to other people. It's a I've come across some incredibly smart people who cannot write. They couldn't write a ransom note, and let alone a patent claim. And so you you can't just throw up your hands and say, "Oh well, this is terrible." No, you got to say, "All right, well, this is what I've got. I know the raw materials are there. Let me get to that."
Yeah.
And I moderated a program in Trenton for New Jersey Technology Council, I believe, and it was a state senator. No, I think it was federal senator. The guy from Princeton, I can't remember his name.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and a bunch of others talking about the economic environment within New Jersey and hiring and what are people
And
looking
you
for
and you work
career
with
wise.
you work with another nonprofit. What's the name of the other nonprofit? The Monmouth
Department
and
of Development Council,
you're right, right.
MODC. Yeah, that's a local kind of. But I remember distinctly the thing in Trenton where somebody says, "I want to hire people out of a good 4-year college who are well-rounded and blah 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 blah," and I thought, "Oh my God." I said, I have done well hiring from the island of misfit toys. I don't care if you have certain deficiencies in your social ability, whatever. If you can do that thing I need to do, or even some subset of it that I can quantify and we can reach an agreement in terms of paying for it, if you can do that thing, I can slide work under your door. You can do it and you can slide it back, and we're all cool. And here's money and raise your family. And it's this notion of like people can do things, and there's a lot of people in technology that are on the spectrum or whatever we call it these days, but they're really, really good at something. And you get them in, you just get them in, and then you have great employees, you have great, colleagues, and it feels good. Honestly, it feels good. So yeah, but I don't know if I have any more.
I think you do. You were saying something about your son and I interrupted you, so I want to go back to that.
Well, I don't know. I just try to tell him things to do the right thing. Nothing crazy. Make more good decisions than bad decisions. 80-20 on your food. Whatever. Just
And how's your grandson?
doing well. Yeah. They have not cut his hair yet. He's got blonde hair down to his shoulders. The brown is coming in. So it turns out that cutting hair doesn't make it brown, just time does.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. You weigh 11.5 and 6.2 pounds.
Wow.
6 months old.
Exciting. Very
That's like my total core dump there.
That's wonderful. Do you have any other wisdom for us? Advice, suggestions, parting comments?
Well, like the critical thoughts on the brothers at CBA were don't try to apply, simple solutions to complex problems, think things out, critical thinking, etc. This whole crowd knows that. Nothing new there. What I would say to my son is not so much is different than what I say to everybody here. You guys have all heard it. But for people going through the hard science, especially sciences where you may not want to take the next step, like chemistry or something like that, you really do need masters. Patent field is actually a good tangent. I should hit that earlier when it looks like a bazillion boxes appear on the screen. But it's patent field is a decent field if you like the law, if you like this kind of stuff, and you're choosing between, like, I knew I had to get a master's or an MBA, or hey, there's this thing called law and patent law and stuff, and I chose that. It was part of my plan to stay in school forever, and I failed because I had to go and work. So that's it. That's all I got.
Yeah, that's all we got. Anybody want to put on the cameras now and say hey and ciao to everyone? What do you think?
Hey, there's a bunch of bots here. A bunch of bots.
Hi, Patrick. How are you? So thank you for joining us tonight.
So realistic. Look at him. Patrick looks real almost.
Yeah. A real person, humans. And Ali,
Yeah.
if you're still there, can we see you or do you have to go? Can you hop on for a minute or two?
Yep, I got to drop. Haven't had my dinner yet, so I bid everyone a fair adieu. Great session, Eamon. Interesting as always, my friend.
Thanks.
Love to talk to you guys soon.
All right.
And
Be well.
go Telstar.
Yes. And Al, if you want to join us for a moment, can you join us or you just
Yeah,
voice?
I can stick around for a few moments.
Excellent.
A great session and touched a bunch of things I've touched too. So I'm sure it'll be fun.
I was going to
Yeah, great.
stop and ask you those questions. I don't know if Eamon got a chance to see your talk, but it's so informative, and I'm really grateful that you had a chance to come tonight because I had a feeling you would relate to a lot of what Eamon has to say. What can you add to the comments that may blend those two topics together?
Without elaborating too much, back when companies first started trying to patent genes during the gene sequencing business, I two of my customers were the Japanese and American patent offices with respect to the question, when were genetic products unique art or new, and what was prior art? So I was very much involved with helping the technology for examiners, as well as helping to testify to what proper definitions of prior art were. So a very interesting field to try to learn a bunch about, particularly primarily as a technologist.
Yeah, that was I think one of the primary cases that came out of all that, and it's still going on, but I think it's pretty settled at this point. You can't simply own a sequence because it already exists. And part of the arguments were, well, yes, it exists, but we didn't call it a sequence. And I think it was for the BRCA, I forget the marker for
The marker for breast
cancer, I
cancer.
believe. Yeah. And
BRCA.
I think that was ultimately held. No, you can't simply own that. You can own method for identifying that or processes and those kinds of things, yes, but not just the broad notion of, I own anything uses that. No. Back to my,
Before it was, there was a time before which it was very difficult to do the sequencing. And so initially, there was a transitional phase where the patent office was very much trying to figure out what was something that you extracted with a function attached enough to become patentable. And there was a period that was the answer, and then that changed.
Yeah, I mean, it all comes down to what are they trying to promote, as far as useful art go. And the patent office does not want to be in the position of telling a bunch of scientists in a really valuable field like genetics, yeah, it doesn't matter what you do, you can't own it, so you might as well not do it. That's not the right message. But yeah, you're right. There was a transition period. Obviously not my art area, but I saw some of this going on. It was always in the literature. There used to be a program called the 4-in-1 program. It was New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, and Philadelphia Intellectual Property Law Associations. They would meet once a year in April. They still do, and I'll probably go this year. And they had all these presentations. It was a one-day thing. And the ultimate cruelty, and people talk about like Eighth Amendment level cruel and unusual things, was that after lunch, when you had something heavy and you were just stuffed, they took away the coffee and they started with the bio people talking about bio stuff. And all of the double E's were, oh God, people were snoring, people were passing out, I swear to God. But I remember this as a hot topic during those times, that this was, I forget who was the doctor who did the first human genome sequence, or said he did, maybe he didn't, I don't know. But
What was his name again? He was on the head. He's on the cover of
guy, I
the
remember.
magazine.
Ventnor, Craig Ventnor.
Yeah.
Yes. So when that happened, then it got sexy. Then it got venture capital sexy, and then the patent office was of the view, oh my God, we can't just do this.
They
This
missed
is
it.
yeah. I mean, at the time you're speaking of, where it was super difficult to sequence and all the rest of it. Yeah, the fact that you actually did sequence something, that something was somewhat a proxy for, yeah, you did something. We should somehow encourage this. I remember talking to some people at the patent office, the technology centers, the relevant technology centers. They were not in the business of making law, but they were certainly in the business of trying not to dissuade innovation. They very much care about innovation.
They had a number of blunders over the years. I mean, the letters that came out saying we don't need any female inventors because we don't need any more handy household items, or we're not.
I don't know about that. There was somebody who said that everything that worth inventing has been invented forever ago.
That was Arno who said
the old-timey days. Yeah. Modern patent law starts in 52 or 5, somewhere in there, I forget, with big revisions in 96 and then subsequently. But this is what is necessary to help protect our innovation. And the crime right now, not crime, that's not the right word, but the tragedy right now with the computer software 101 type stuff is that the patchy way it's done and the frankly stupid way it's done is ceding a competitive advantage to other countries, adversaries or, allies, it doesn't matter. We're avoiding giving American industries the ability to own that which they've invented that should be patentable. In some countries, I think South Korea has now gone towards, on the software side, you can claim software doing this. That's okay. Not here.
Yeah,
nope.
yeah.
But we can work with it to do the same.
They're already the leaders in robotics, and now they're, and it's a small country with not a lot of people. And one of the other things is it's remarkable how expensive it is for people to file patents to the point where they're fighting. Like you were saying, you have the best possible people in certain companies and they're all sitting together doing stuff. Then they have to compete with each other for the small amount of money the company's willing to pay to patent their stuff. And meanwhile, it's affordable for the government of China, for example, to pay any inventor whatever it costs for them to patent their stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with China's approach to you should be patenting things. If your people
Yeah,
are
but
inventing
we
things, you
should
should be
be
patenting.
patenting
Yeah.
things. We should be patenting things.
There
Our
are
own.
differences in the patent applications from Asia. Well, I guess East Asia, I don't even know. You know, Japan, Korea, China tend to be smaller. We have larger applications with many more embodiments. Japan, in particular, this is a patent. It's fewer pages, fewer claims. You know, 5 claims, 4 claims, something like that. It's quite common.
Well, but
More
don't
focused.
people have like 3 claims and the rest are dependent claims, right? Most of them.
Well, you can have as many as you want, but you just have to pay.
Right.
You can have up to 3 independent and up to 20 total claims for the patent fee. Then it's an additional whatever it is per claim.
Right.
And I always just file with the 20. And if you know, you have a few sitting in your back pocket that if some get knocked out, you add others. And then later when things are allowed, you just, you know, the so-called 1-3-12 amendment, you just add a bunch of dependencies from whatever. But it's a business thing. There's a kind of a game theory thing that goes on, and you need to make sure you spend your, you know, money well, because it is expensive, and you can't patent everything. So you gotta be somewhat, you know, choosy.
Right, but when you look at the sheer numbers of smart people in one lab, and then they have to fight like it's, what is that game again? The Hunger Games or something to get the attention of the company so they can get their stuff patented. You know, this is this difficult thing, and I think the Commerce Department in the United States should step up to that. And you know,
They are. I mean, their job isn't to choose what companies should spend their money on. Their job is to accept that money and do the thing the companies want done in the patent sense.
I'm just saying that there's a lot of people who have to fight, you know, to get their, that's the thing.
Yeah. If the business decision is made that that's the system that needs to be, then that's just what it is. There are a lot of really good inventions that never get patented, and there are a lot of stupid things where patent applications are filed. You know, patent doesn't equal good idea. It doesn't. Plenty of good ideas are not patented. Trade secret is a great route. It's a great way to go. Trade secret, and it all starts with not talking about it.
Yep. Squid Game is the Hunger Game. Yes. I can't even cut my attention. Like I have a hard time just like watching those things. They're so painful. Some of these movies that are
I haven't seen those movies. Yeah,
it's so
Squid
painful.
Game. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw Hunger Games and I almost, you know, lost it. I, you know, still have nightmares.
But the teenagers fighting to the death to feed their something. I don't know. I didn't see it.
Yeah. It's also got the DNA thing going on, and you know, who's the better version of the human, and all the other things that are just crazy and unhappy, and so.
Yeah.
But I'm happy to see everyone tonight, and I just want to thank you all. I'm sorry, Eamon. Go ahead. You
I don't know. There's probably no car chases in it, so I wouldn't have noticed.
I don't think so. I'm going to turn off the recording, and I would say good night to the recording people.